Imagine this. You're not in your body. You're watching yourself from somewhere else, far behind your eyes, hovering just out of reach. You see your hands move, your lips speak, your feet walk the same streets you always do. But something feels off, like you're a passenger in a vessel called you. And in that moment, a quiet question bubbles up from beneath the noise of everyday thought. Who's actually watching? Not your thoughts. They're loud, reactive, fleeting. Not your memories. They change over time. Not your emotions. They come and go like weather. But the one watching, that has never changed. That silent observer. The one that's always been there. Even when you were 5, 15, 50. The one that noticed your first heartbreak, your happiest laugh, your quietest moment alone in the dark. That isn't just your mind. That is consciousness. And it is the most powerful thing you will ever possess. Science is only beginning to whisper what the mystics have shouted for centuries. Consciousness is not in the body. It is not the brain's side project. It is not a trick of neurons. Consciousness is before thought, beyond time and beneath everything. It is not a result of life, it is the origin of it. And here's the secret. You've been using it every day, without ever realizing what it actually is. That is the first fracture in the illusion. A glimpse behind the veil that's been pulled over your eyes since birth. This moment right here is where the unraveling begins. For most of us, consciousness is like the sky. We live under it. We move through it. But we never stop to consider that it might be the very structure that holds everything together. Not just for us, but for reality itself. Ancient mystics from Tibet to Egypt, from the Vedas of India to the hidden doctrines of the West, didn't merely study consciousness. They entered it. They charted its levels like hidden continents. They treated it not as a passive awareness, but as an active force capable of creation, healing, transformation, even liberation. They taught that this force, the one that witnesses your every thought and moment, wasn't just watching life unfold. It was shaping it, what science now approaches through the lens of quantum mechanics, cognitive neuroscience, and non-locality. The mystics approached through silence, stillness, and surrender. While the former uses machines to peer into the brain, the latter use the body as a gateway, the breath as a compass, and the mind as a mirror. But both, oddly, finally are starting to converge on the same whispered truth. Consciousness might not be a product of the universe. The universe might be a product of consciousness. Pause on that. What if your attention isn't just noticing reality, but helping create it? What if your sense of I am isn't a side effect of neurons, but the root source of all experience, all memory, all meaning? And what if through understanding this, you could awaken something in yourself so ancient, so powerful, that it changes not only how you live, but what you believe life even is? This is not spiritual poetry. This is not mere metaphor. This is the cutting edge of 2 worlds-long thought. To be separate, science and spirituality, finally touching fingertips through the fabric of consciousness. And if you feel something stirring inside you, an echo, a resonance, it's because a deeper part of you already knows. You were never just flesh. You were never just thought. You were never just one person in one body, walking one path toward one ending. You are the spark behind your story. And consciousness, that's not just your power. It's your birthright. Beneath the noise of life, beneath the ringing phones, flashing screens, daily appointments, and relentless streams of thought, there is a silence. Not an empty silence. A living one. A silence that listens, observes, remembers. This silence is not something you enter. It is what you are when all the layers are peeled away. This silence is consciousness. And once you recognize it, you begin to see that the world you thought you knew was built on mirrors and echoes. Almost everything you've been taught to trust, your identity, your thoughts, even the idea of time, is constructed atop the quiet, blazing reality of awareness. Mystics understood this, not as an idea to debate, but as an experience to be lived. They understood that you are not your thoughts. You are the field in which thought arises. You are not your emotions. You are the ocean in which they ripple and fade. You are not even your body. You are the stillness witnessing its every motion, change, decay, and renewal. That's the first great theme that has echoed through centuries of mystical thought. You are not what changes. You are what sees the change. The sages of the East called it the self beyond the self. In the Upanishads, they called it Atman, the witnessing awareness that is not born and does not die. In Taoist thought, it is the uncarved block, the still point. In Christian mysticism, it appears as the secret chamber where the divine presence resides. In Sufi poetry, it dances in the desert, nameless, faceless, burning like a hidden sun. And now, science is beginning to circle this truth, not directly, but unmistakably, through studies of neuroplasticity, observer effects in quantum physics, and near-death experiences that defy explanation. A strange truth emerges. The observer is not neutral. It shapes the observed. This leads us to the second core insight. Consciousness is not passive. It is participatory. It does not merely register reality like a camera, it bends it, influences it, colors it. Where you place your attention, life begins to rearrange itself. Focus on fear and reality begins to reflect shadows. Focus on gratitude, and the same reality begins to shine with a different light. Consciousness is the great filter, not because it distorts, but because it directs. Like a lens catching sunlight and igniting dry leaves, your awareness focuses the raw energy of existence into meaning, action, and form. This isn't wishful thinking, it's foundational. The very structure of perception, what you see, what you believe, what you remember, is filtered through what you expect and what you focus on. Mystics didn't need EEG machines to prove this. They closed their eyes, watched their breath, entered the deep halls of meditation, and returned to tell us, the world is not as it seems. And this leads us to perhaps the most sacred realization of all. Consciousness is not yours alone, though it feels personal, because it looks out through your eyes, listens through your ears, feels through your heart. It is, in its essence, shared, collective, even universal. You and I are waves on the same ocean, temporary peaks of the same great field. The mystics called this the One, the Source, the ground of being. It is why the Buddha said, there is no self, not as a denial of identity, but as a reminder that identity is the smallest truth. Beneath the self, there is only consciousness, only the witnessing, only the timeless now. Modern science is beginning to echo this as well, through non-dual theories of mind, panpsychism, and the recognition that material explanations keep bumping up against something irreducible. That irreducible thing is awareness itself. To the mystic, this was never a surprise. It was the first thing they learned when they stepped beyond the veil of ordinary thought, that the universe is not a dead machine with life inside it. It is a living field of consciousness, with matter as its shadow, time as its rhythm, and thought as its dream. So when we say consciousness is a superpower, we are not simply talking about mindfulness, focus, or intelligence. We are talking about the capacity to wake up inside the dream, to realize that the movie you are watching is being projected by something deep inside you, and that you are not merely a character in the script. You are the light in the projector. And once you realize this, everything changes. Not instantly, not without challenge, but profoundly. You begin to walk differently, not because you've learned new things, but because you've remembered something ancient. You are consciousness itself, tasting human life for a moment. And that is the secret mystics have carried like fire in their hands, waiting for a world ready to listen. There are some truths that logic cannot touch, not because they are false, but because they are too vast. These truths don't arrive through data. They descend like myths. They speak in symbols, not syllables. And for those who truly listen, they don't just inform, they transform. So the mystics, knowing that words often fail where the soul begins, turned to stories, symbolic parables wrapped in poetic skin. These stories weren't meant to be solved like puzzles, but lived through, felt, and slowly understood as their meanings unfolded like petals in the dark. Let me tell you one such story, one you've always known, though perhaps you've never heard it this way. Once, before memory had a name, a child of light wandered the edge of the great cosmic sea. This child had no body, no voice, no form, only awareness, pure and vast as the sky before stars. It played among frequencies, danced through galaxies, whispered with the wind between worlds. But something stirred within it, a longing not for more but for experience, not for knowledge but for knowing. And so this child dove. It fell through layers of vibration, through the great mirror of illusion, until it landed in a world of matter, cold, dense, slow. And in that moment, it forgot the stars, the song, the weightlessness of being, lost behind a veil. It took a body, learned a name, learned hunger, learned pain, and it began to mistake the costume for itself. But now and then, between the noise and the numbness, it would remember. Not fully, but faintly. A dream it couldn't name, a warmth behind the eyes, a voice beneath the thoughts. And the child would pause, would listen, and in that pause, eternity would whisper, "You are not what you seem." This is the myth of every human being. You, me, the stranger on the subway, the mystic in the cave, the scientist at the microscope. Each of us is the child who fell into form and forgot the sky. And consciousness, the pure, radiant flame of awareness, is the thread leading us back. In ancient traditions, this story takes many forms. The Gnostics told of a divine spark trapped in flesh, seeking to remember its celestial origin. The Sufis spoke of the soul as a reed, torn from the riverbed, crying in music to return home. The yogis taught of Maya, the great illusion, and of Samadhi, the awakening from the dream. But all these point to one thing: the human experience is not a mistake. It's a journey of remembrance. Even in the West, where the language of spirit was replaced by psychology and science, the symbols remain. In fairy tales, the hero always begins by forgetting who they are. In myths, the gods fall to earth only to rediscover their divinity through struggle. In every dream you've ever had where you were lost, searching for something unnamed, you were tracing the same arc. The descent into forgetfulness is not failure. It is the setup, because only in forgetting can the joy of remembering be born. And in that act of remembering, not with the mind, but with the soul, consciousness reveals its power. Imagine the mind as a house with many rooms. In each room there are beliefs, roles, memories, fears. Most people live in just one or two of those rooms, never questioning what's behind the locked doors. But consciousness is the key. The moment you become aware of a belief, it loosens. The moment you observe a fear without being consumed by it, its grip begins to fade. You are no longer in the room. You are looking at it. And this shift, from being inside the illusion to seeing it, changes everything. This is what the mystics knew. They knew that freedom doesn't come from rearranging the furniture in the mind. It comes from stepping outside the house altogether, from standing on the threshold and realizing, I built this, and I can walk beyond it. Another story, short, simple, timeless. A sage once asked his disciple, "What is holding you back?" The disciple said, "The world." The sage smiled. "The world is not holding you. You are holding it." And in that one sentence, the illusion shattered. Because when you realize that it is your awareness that gives the world weight, meaning gravity, then you also realize that changing your consciousness doesn't just change your mind. It changes the world itself. Consciousness is a mirror, yes, but not a passive one. It reflects, it bends, it amplifies. It is both the painter and the canvas. And once you understand this, you stop trying to fix the image in the mirror and begin to focus on the one looking. That is the beginning of power, not the kind that conquers, the kind that liberates. It's easy to leave these truths floating in the high clouds of philosophy, to let them linger as distant stars, beautiful, unreachable, poetic. But that is not where their power lies. The mystics, for all their cryptic symbols and cave-dwelling silences, were not escaping life. They were re-entering it from a deeper place. And so must we. Because if consciousness is a superpower, it must function here amidst traffic, taxes, illness, heartbreak, and noise. It must breathe inside alarm, clocks and quiet tears, and the hush that follows an argument. Its radiance must reach not just into the mountaintop meditation, but into your kitchen at 7 a.m. when you're exhausted and the day is already asking too much. The first and simplest shift is this: to become aware that you are aware. That sounds small, it is not. To recognize that there is a part of you that watches your thoughts means that you are not your thoughts. You can interrupt the automatic narrative that says, this is who I am, this is how life works, this is what I deserve. You start to see that these thoughts are old recordings, background programming passed down by culture, trauma, family, fear. And in seeing that, you stop being their puppet. Instead of reacting, you begin to respond. You pause before the anger erupts. You notice the shame as it rises, but don't let it pilot your mouth. You feel the anxiety and greet it, not as truth, but as a sensation. This is not spiritual bypassing. It's not denial. It's the exact opposite. It is presence so fierce it holds the emotion without flinching. That is consciousness in action. It creates space. And in that space, transformation begins. Let's say you've lived your entire life believing you are unworthy of love. That belief becomes the lens through which you see the world. You sabotage relationships, you deflect compliments, you interpret kindness as pity. But one day you become aware of that belief, not just as an idea in your head, but as a felt limitation. You sit with it, observe it, question it, and in doing so, you are no longer fused with it. It becomes a part of your story, not the author. This is not therapy, though it can complement therapy. It's not religion, though it sits at the root of every spiritual path. This is the raw act of reclaiming authorship, of remembering that the movie you are living in is being projected through the lens of your consciousness, and that lens can be cleaned. Now consider your daily choices, what you consume, what you speak, where you put your time. Most people assume their actions come from logic or habit, but those are just surface ripples. The deeper truth is this: your state of consciousness determines your life's rhythm. If you're identified with fear, everything becomes a threat. If you're lost in scarcity, even abundance feels like a tease. But if you're rooted in presence, even chaos carries a hidden symmetry. You begin to feel life from underneath the roles and rules. This doesn't mean life gets easier. Pain still comes, loss still arrives, but your relationship to them shifts. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to ask, "What is this revealing in me?" The victim becomes the witness. The witness becomes the alchemist. This shift also alters how we treat others, because once you see yourself as a temporary wave on the sea of consciousness, you begin to recognize that every person, friend, stranger, enemy is also a wave. Their behavior may be hurtful, their words may be toxic, but beneath it all is the same presence, distorted maybe, but not absent. You learn to set boundaries without hatred, to speak truth without needing to dominate, to love without possession, because your identity no longer depends on being right, being liked, or being in control. You begin to act, not from fear or approval, but from alignment. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to listen again, not to the loudest voice, but to the quietest one, the one that whispers before the thought forms, the one that sees through your eyes but is not bound by your name. That still, subtle presence is not separate from you. It is you. The mystics did not escape the world. They simply stopped believing it was the whole story. They re-entered it, holding something vast and still behind their gaze. And it changed how they walked, how they spoke, how they suffered, how they served. This is how consciousness becomes a power, not by escaping the dream, but by waking up inside it, one moment at a time. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey, not marked by a thunderclap or trumpet blast, but by something quieter, a stillness, a shift, a breath taken not just into the lungs, but into the soul. A moment when you're no longer reaching for truth out there, in books or beliefs or borrowed words, but realizing it has always been curled, patient and glowing within you. And this moment, this return is the threshold. If you've followed the thread this far, you've already begun crossing it. You've felt it, haven't you? That faint trembling in the air around your thoughts, that widening space between reaction and response. That whisper beneath the mind saying, "Look again. You're more than this." This is the secret mystics carried across centuries. This is the treasure buried beneath temples, the code stitched into parables, the lamp hidden under a basket. You are not merely in the universe is within your consciousness. Science is catching up, not just reluctantly but reverently. As telescopes expand outward and microscopes plunge inward, both seem to point to the same astonishing truth. What we call reality behaves differently, depending on how it is observed. The universe is not fixed, it is relational. And at the center of that relationship is you, or rather, the you that sees, feels, and knows beyond words. But don't let this realization remain a beautiful idea. Let it become a compass. Let it rewire how you walk through the world. Let it remind you that presence is not a luxury. It is the only place life ever happens. Let it shift how you face pain, not as punishment, but as a portal. Let it guide your choices, not toward what looks safe, but toward what feels real. Let it change the way you see others, not as separate players on a stage, but as reflections of the same hidden light trying to find itself in form. There is no technique more powerful than awareness, no tool more transformative than attention placed with intention. No pill, no mantra, no ritual that compares to the simple, sacred act of sitting still and asking, who is the one experiencing this moment? And then listening, Not for an answer, but for a silence that knows. You do not need to become enlightened to awaken. You do not need to be perfect to be present. You only need to remember that you are not the story. You are the storyteller. You are not the flame's shadow. You are the fire. And the world you've been navigating in confusion, in search of meaning, is not a prison. It's a mirror. Once you see this, not as a thought, but as a knowing that vibrates in your marrow, you will stop trying to escape your life and start entering it more deeply, because now you carry the key. Consciousness is not a theory. It is not even a discovery. It is a return. So take a breath. Let it anchor you. Let it widen your inner sky. Let this not be the end of a video, but the beginning of a shift. The mystics left the door open. The scientists are just now finding the map. But the journey itself, it's yours to walk. Wake up, not just from sleep, but from forgetting. Wake up to the infinite that has always been humming behind your heartbeat. Wake up to the superpower you never knew you had, because it was never something to find. It was always something to remember.